Hello, praying citizens. This is Lori Colley. It's January 4th, 2018. Let's get into the headlines. Snow and political storms abound. Many parts of the U.S. are experiencing record cold and massive amounts of snow and freezing rain, and the political atmosphere has blizzards of its own. First, let's look at the good news. The Dow Jones Industrial Average reached 25,000 on Thursday, gaining 37% since the 2016 election. It has been the fastest 1,000-point gain in the market's history. Economists credit Trump's tax cut for the boom, which allows companies to repatriate money and pay a one-time tax rate of 15%. This puts U.S. corporations on par with companies in other industrialized nations in terms of revenue earned overseas. More good news. 190,000 new jobs were added in November, with fewer layoffs than expected. This is also good news. 40 companies have announced they will be giving employees Trump tax reform bonuses up to $2,000 per worker. A new report from the Center of Immigration Studies says President Trump cut the influx of refugees by 70% his first 11 months in office. The number went from 93,668 during Obama's first year to 28,875 under Trump. Now let's move on to the political firestorm. A book about the Trump presidency called Fire and Fury is creating a storm of its own. Steve Bannon, Trump's former chief strategist, was quoted heavily in the book, mostly saying deeply derogatory statements about the president, such as he prefers to eat McDonald's because he's afraid of being poisoned, and Trump never really planned to win. Author Michael Wolff says he based the book on hundreds of interviews. The president's lawyers have filed a cease and desist order against the publisher for making false and misleading statements. White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders called the book complete fantasy, and several people who have been quoted by the author say much of the information is fabricated. A popular speculation among some is that Bannon and Trump have staged this quote-unquote fight in order to create a sideshow to hide the important things that are being done under wraps. On Thursday, Attorney General Jeff Sessions reversed an Obama policy that essentially allowed states to ignore federal law and legalize marijuana without fear of federal prosecution. Some argue that Sessions' act is an infringement on states' rights. Representative Cory Gardner, a Republican from Colorado, announced he would be putting a hold on approving any nominees for the Department of Justice in retaliation. Colorado, you might know, is among the more than 25 states that have already legalized marijuana for medicinal use and one of the 8 states that have legalized recreational marijuana. President Trump disbanded the Voter Fraud Commission and is moving the investigation to the Department of Homeland Security. One member of the commission, Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach, says Democrats and organizations such as the ACLU and NAACP were stonewalling the investigation and have no interest in stopping voter fraud. Now let's get to my favorite part, the Conspiracy Corner. This is an update on the Q posts. One of the recent posts by the Trump insider who calls himself Q on the 8chan bulletin board suggested that big changes are coming and finally the corruption in the D.C. swamp will be identified and dealt with. Q said we will know it's happening because 30 people in Congress would not return following the holiday break, which is at the end of next week. There have already been more than 20 announcements of retirement, plus dozens and dozens of corporation resignations, including Eric Schmidt of Google. Q also mentioned we would have a period of darkness, and he put that in parentheses 10. Now this 10 could refer to the 10 or so hours of darkness at the Atlanta airport December 17th, which caused a cancellation of 1,180 flights, or it could be the 10 days of silence when there were no posts by Q. Whichever it is, or both, Q told us all is well, have faith, pray, and enjoy the show. Last week, Trump paved the way to getting things rolling by declaring a state of emergency to go after human rights abusers, pedophiles, and human traffickers, and through executive order, he gave the government the right to seize their assets. which leads one to believe that the next step in the process would be massive arrests and doing whatever is necessary to keep criminals from fleeing. So here are the strange events that lead one to believe it's happening. 12 people were said to have been killed in a plane crash in Costa Rica on Christmas Day. 2 pilots and 10 others who were members of 2 American families, the Steinbergs and the Weitzes. Bruce Steinberg was a senior member of the Bridgewater Hedge Fund's research team, the same team on which former FBI Director Jim Comey served. One of the pilots was the cousin of the former president of Costa Rica, who was a close personal friend of Hillary Clinton. According to Q, 7 out of 10 plane crashes aren't accidents. Richard Cousins, a man from Britain, his 2 sons, his fiancée, and her daughter were reportedly killed in a seaplane crash December 31st in Sydney, Australia. Cousins was the head of the British catering giant Compass. Then in the U.S., an ANA flight took off on December 26 from Los Angeles. 4 hours into the flight to Tokyo, the pilots turned the plane around due to 4 unauthorized persons being on board. Once on the ground in LA, the passengers were forced to sign non-disclosures, indicating they would not discuss what they saw. On January 2nd, an Alaska Airlines flight from Oakland to Portland was canceled because of a rat in the cockpit. The passengers were deplaned and booked on other flights. A Delta flight to Atlanta on December 31st had to return to the Detroit airport shortly after takeoff because of a bird in the cockpit. Boy, you just can't keep things out of your plane if you're not careful. A Delta flight from Atlanta to London on January 2nd had to turn around twice because of strange noises. The first time, they were about 30 minutes into the flight and the pilot declared an emergency because they were hearing strange noises. And he came on and told the passengers, there's nothing wrong with the plane, but we're declaring an emergency because we don't know what the noises are. They turned the plane around and they went back to Atlanta. Once they arrived, everybody got off, they changed planes and took off again. And the same thing happened, these strange noises. The pilot declared another emergency and returned again to Atlanta. One passenger called the experience surreal. United States Customs and Border Protection suffered a processing system outage that put a hold on travelers returning to the country for 2 hours on January 1st. The outage affected airports across the U.S. such as Atlanta, JFK, Miami, Denver, and Chicago. An Amtrak train derailed late Wednesday, January 3rd, in Savannah, Georgia. Dustin Hetzel, the CEMA Senior Emergency Management Coordinator, said the train's baggage cart derailed while the train was backing into the station at 9:42 p.m. No cars were overturned. The train was traveling from Miami to Virginia. A small plane disappeared on Wednesday, January 3rd. It took off from Wiley Post Airport in Oklahoma City, headed for Texas, and then somehow disappeared over the Gulf of Mexico. The U.S. Coast Guard is searching for the plane. It's believed that the pilot, Dr. John Kinsinger, suffered some sort of medical event. There is a Clinton connection here. The plane is registered to Abide LLC, owned by Matthew Bergler. His brother William Bergler is CEO of Chesapeake Energy, a direct payment donor to the Clinton Foundation. And here's an interesting side note. William Berger's former partner, someone named Aubrey McClendon, died in 2016 when his vehicle struck an overpass and burst into flames. That was 24 hours after he was indicted on conspiracy charges. And again, they said he may have suffered some sort of, quote, medical event. And then there's this. Bill and Hillary Clinton's Chappaqua, New York home caught fire January 3rd. A fire department source told the local reporters that he saw, quote, smashed up hard drives, melted memory cards, and the charred remains of paper scattered all over the room. He immediately knew the fire must have started there. He also explained that the house fire was put out by Secret Service agents before the fire department arrived. It was labeled a Code 1041, which is firefighters' code for a suspicious fire. As some have noted, setting a fire can do one of two things. It can either destroy evidence or it could be used as an excuse for someone to go in to search a home without a warrant. And I haven't even gotten to this conspiracy angle yet. but let's do that now. Data collected by researchers that have been paid by conspiracy theorists, because there are some weird things going on, shows that there are 9,200 plus sealed federal indictments. But this is many times the normal amount of indictments for any given year. Sealed indictments are typically used in prosecuting individuals or criminal networks in cases where revealing names could cause those criminals to run or to destroy evidence. Jeff Sessions appointed 17 interim U.S. attorneys on Wednesday. All are current or former federal prosecutors and were appointed in order to handle rising violent crime, including homicides. Is it possible these interim U.S. attorneys will be supervising grand juries to handle the caseload of federal criminals guilty on human rights abuses? According to the President's executive order, foreign nationals, let's see, such as George Soros or the Rothschilds, and anyone else caught in violation of U.S. law can be prosecuted. If they're found guilty, and there were 9,200 of them, where would these people be housed? I don't know. But I do know that we have a fairly empty detention center in Guantanamo Bay that would be a possible location. And that brings me to the last part of the story. 50 members of the Arizona National Guard have landed in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, where we do have a nice detention center. The troops will remain in Gitmo for 9 months, acting to inform and advise the Joint Task Force commander there on military police tasks and procedures. According to the commander, it is a sensitive mission, and they don't want to telegraph to the world who is going, who's there, and who's performing the mission. The Guardsmen will have no contact with the 41 current terrorist detainees. Now, on Wednesday evening, the 10 days of darkness were up, and Q began posting again. He referred to good actors making great movies. And some have wondered, is he possibly talking about the Trump-Bannon dust-up? He also posted other information, but it was very cryptic, and the autists, is what they affectionately call themselves, the people who do nothing but try to decipher Q's posts, are working on those things, and I will let you know when I know more about it. Now, nobody knows if any of this will pan out, but it is our hope and prayer that it will. It's my hope and prayer. I've been waiting for this for many decades. And I want to know, for you, what better present as an American could you have for the new year than that these criminals are caught and judged and put away, that we will finally see justice done for the American people. So let's just keep praying for full disclosure, for the wicked to be removed, and for God to receive the glory. And Father, we ask all those things in Jesus' name. And according to Psalm 63:11, the king shall rejoice in God. Every one that swears by him shall glory, but the mouth of them that speak lies shall be stopped. Thanks for praying. See you next time.